What is the true value of a single act of kindness? For Liam Anderson, a single father whose world had shrunk to the size of his daughter's smile and the grease under his fingernails, it was simply the right thing to do. He never expected that fixing a stranger's broken-down motorbike on a rain-soaked Tuesday would ignite a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about wealth loss and the true meaning of love. He had no idea the woman huddled under the failing light of a street lamp was Isabella Sterling, a billionaire widow, trapped in a golden cage, searching for one thing her money could never buy, a genuine human connection. This is the story of how one rainy night, two lonely hearts and a sputtering engine changed everything. The rain in Seattle had a way of washing the color out of the world, leaving behind a city of smudged grays and weary blues. For Liam Anderson, it was the soundtrack to his life, a steady, percussive rhythm against the tin roof of Henderson's Auto Repair, the place where he spent 10 hours a day trying to mend the broken things of other people's lives. His own life felt permanently fractured. 3 years had passed since he'd lost his wife, Sarah, to a fight she'd waged with breathtaking bravery. Now his world consisted of two things: the scent of oil and gasoline and the bright, unwavering light of his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Every turn of the wrench, every replaced gasket, every painstakingly balanced tire was for her. It was for the small second-floor apartment they called home, for the worn-out art supplies she cherished, and for the dream of one day buying her the brand-new bicycle she'd been circling in a catalogue for months, a dream that felt as distant as the sun on this bleak August afternoon. The day was ending. The final drops of a sputtering oil change dripped into a pan as Liam wiped his hands on an already ruined rag. He was tired, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that had less to do with work and more to do with the constant low-grade hum of financial anxiety. He was just starting to think about Lily, who was with their neighbor Mrs. Gable, when a sound cut through the rhythm of the rain. It was a cough, a sputter, and then a final metallic groan. A motorcycle. Just outside the garage bay, a vintage Triumph Bonneville, a beautiful but notoriously finicky machine, had given up the ghost. A lone figure in a soaked leather jacket and helmet was trying in vain to restart it. Liam sighed. It was 5:05 p.m. He was off the clock. But Sarah's voice, a warm echo in his memory, whispered, "You don't leave people stranded. Liam." He grabbed a rain jacket and stepped out. "Having trouble," he called out over the downpour. The rider looked up, pushing a rain-slicked visor. It was a woman. Even with her face partially obscured, he could see the frustration in her posture. "You could say that," she replied, her voice strained. "She just died on me. The Triumphs are moody." Liam said, his eyes already scanning the bike with a practiced ease. "Mind if I take a look?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second, before nodding. Liam knelt the cold asphalt seeping through his jeans. He didn't see the expensive, albeit weathered, Bellstaff jacket or the subtle quality of her boots. He saw a flooded carburetor and a loose spark plug wire. His hands moved with a familiar, confident grace. He tapped the float bowl, reseated the wire, and checked the fuel line. "Try it now," he said, standing up. "Gently." The woman swung a leg over the bike and thumbed the starter. The engine, after a moment of protest, roared to life with a deep, satisfying rumble. A look of genuine astonishment washed over her face as she lifted her visor completely. And for the first time, Liam saw her. She wasn't conventionally beautiful in the way models in magazines were. Her face was framed by damp, dark hair sticking to her temples. There were faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes that were a startling shade of green, like moss after a storm. But what struck Liam was the vulnerability in them. It was a look he recognized, the look of someone trying to hold it all together. "Wow," she breathed. "Thank you. I was about to give up. How much do I owe you?" She reached into a small saddlebag. Liam shook his head, a small smile touching his lips. It was a loose wire and a stubborn carb. Call it a courtesy to a classic bike. Just be good to her. "No, I insist," she said, pulling out her wallet. The leather was supple, and for a fleeting second he saw the corner of a black credit card with platinum lettering. "Honestly, don't worry about it," Liam said, taking a step back. "Everyone has a bad day. Glad I could help make yours a little better. Just get home safe." He was already turning to go back inside, eager to get out of the rain and on his way to Lily. "Wait!" she called out. He turned. "I'm Izzy," she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm. "Liam," he replied. "Take care, Izzy." As he walked away, Isabella Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, a global technology and investment firm worth an estimated $12 billion, sat on her late husband's motorcycle and watched him go. For the first time in years, someone had helped her without knowing her name. Someone had offered her kindness without an agenda. He hadn't seen a billionaire, a CEO, or a target for a proposal. He'd just seen a person in the rain. And in the cold, isolating world she inhabited, that simple act felt like a miracle. She looked down at his retreating figure, a man with grease-stained hands and a tired slump to his shoulders, and felt a flicker of warmth she hadn't realized she was missing. A week passed. The rain gave way to a fragile, watery sunlight that did little to warm the city. For Liam, life fell back into its predictable rhythm. Work, pick up Lily cook, dinner, help with homework, read a bedtime story, and fall into bed only to do it all again. The woman on the motorcycle, Izzy, became a fleeting memory, a brief, pleasant interaction in a sea of routine. He was in the middle of wrestling with a seized bolt on a pickup truck when his boss, Mr. Henderson, a gruff but fair man in his late 60s, called him over. "Anderson front desk. Someone's asking for you specifically." Liam frowned. That was unusual. Sales reps usually dealt with Henderson. He wiped his hands and walked to the small, cluttered office at the front of the garage. Standing there looking slightly out of place amidst the smell of rubber and old coffee was Izzy. Today she wasn't clad in soaked leather. She wore simple jeans, a soft green sweater that matched her eyes, and a plain beige trench coat. Her hair was dry and fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Without the helmet and the rain, she looked different, softer. The exhaustion was still there in the back of her eyes, but it was overshadowed by a nervous energy. "Hi," she said, a small tentative smile on her face. "I hope this isn't a bad time." "Izzy?" "No, not at all. Is the bike giving you trouble again?" "No, she's running like a dream, thanks to you," she said. "Actually, I came to properly thank you." She held up a small, elegant-looking box tied with a ribbon. "It's just some coffee from a local roaster. I wanted to make sure you got something for your help." Liam felt a strange mix of appreciation and awkwardness. He wasn't used to this. "You really didn't have to do that." "I know," she said, "but I wanted to, and I was also hoping I could buy you a cup of coffee, as a thank you. My treat." He was about to refuse to say he was busy, but he found himself hesitating. There was a sincerity in her offer that was hard to dismiss, and honestly, the thought of a 20-minute break from the stubborn bolt was incredibly appealing. "Okay," he heard himself say. "Yeah, okay. There's a diner a block away. I have my lunch break in 30. Her smile widened, and it transformed her face, chasing away the shadows. Perfect. 30 minutes later, they were sitting in a worn vinyl booth at the Greasy Spoon, a name the owner had embraced with ironic pride. The air smelled of bacon and brewing coffee. It was Liam's world, not hers, yet she didn't seem to notice or care about the chipped Formica tabletop or the faded pictures on the wall. She insisted on paying sliding a regular debit card, not the black card he'd glimpsed to the waitress. She'd introduced herself as Izzy Clark, a freelance graphic designer. It was a plausible, simple lie. It was her mother's maiden name, a small shield against the world. "So you fix things for a living," she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "Something like that," Liam chuckled. "Mostly, I convince rusted metal to do what it's supposed to. It's a lot like negotiating with a stubborn toddler." The comment made her laugh, a genuine, unforced sound. "I wouldn't know anything about that." "You don't have kids?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Her smile faltered for a second. "No, I was married. My husband, Richard, he passed away a couple of years ago, a heart attack. Very sudden." The casual diner atmosphere suddenly felt intimate. "I'm sorry," Liam said softly. "I get it. I lost my wife, Sarah, 3 years ago." Her gaze met his, and in that moment, a silent, profound understanding passed between them. They were members of the same unwanted club. They didn't need to explain the hollowness, the phantom limb sensation of loss, the challenge of navigating a world that kept spinning when theirs had stopped. "You have a daughter, though?" she asked, her voice gentle. Liam's face lit up the way it always did when he spoke of Lily. "Yeah, Lily. She's 8. She's everything. She wants to be an artist, draws on everything that stands still long enough. She sounds wonderful." "She is. She's the reason for all of it," he said, gesturing vaguely at his grease-stained work shirt. "What about you? Graphic design must be interesting." "It's creative," Isabella said, carefully navigating the narrative she was building. "It lets me work from home. It can be a bit isolating, though." The last part was true. Terribly, painfully true. Her home was a sprawling, sterile mansion overlooking Puget Sound, and her work involved billion-dollar acquisitions and board meetings that felt more like battlefields. They talked for nearly an hour, well past Liam's break. They didn't talk about work or money. They talked about favorite movies, the strangest food they'd ever eaten, the shared ache of losing a partner, and the small joys that get you through the day. Liam found himself opening up in a way he hadn't with anyone since Sarah. Izzy or Isabella felt a sense of normalcy she hadn't experienced in over a decade. He wasn't impressed by her because he had nothing to be impressed by. He was just interested in her. As they parted ways outside the diner, she turned to him. "Liam, I really enjoyed this." "Me too," he said, and he meant it. "Maybe we could do it again sometime." The question hung in the air, delicate and hopeful. "I'd like that," he said, with a genuine smile. That evening, as Liam tucked Lily into bed, she was finishing a drawing. It was a picture of him holding a giant wrench with a smiling sun in the corner. "Who's that lady you were having coffee with, Daddy?" she asked, her crayon hovering over the page. "Mrs. Gable, their neighbor, was a notorious curtain twitcher. "Just a new friend, sweetie. Her name is Izzy." Lily looked at him with the profound, unsettling wisdom of a child. "She has sad eyes. Like you used to." Liam felt a lump form in his throat. He kissed her forehead, the familiar scent of her shampoo, a comforting anchor. "Yeah, maybe. But I think she smiles with them, too." He didn't know it, but miles away, in a house too big and too quiet, Isabella Sterling was looking at the city lights, the box of expensive coffee, sitting untouched on her marble countertop. She was smiling too. For the first time in a long time, it reached her eyes. She had told him her name was Izzy Clark, and for the first time it didn't feel like a lie, but like a chance to be someone else. Someone real. The coffee dates became a regular thing. Once a week, sometimes twice, Izzy would meet Liam at the diner. They graduated from coffee to lunch. She was introduced to Lily one Saturday when she happened to be at the park near their apartment. Lily, who was usually shy, took to Izzy immediately. They sat on a bench, a billionaire CEO and an 8-year-old girl seriously discussing the optimal color palette for a unicorn with a jetpack. Liam watched them, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the weak afternoon sun. Izzy didn't talk down to Lily. She listened with a focused intensity that made his daughter feel like the most important person in the world. For Isabella, these moments were like oxygen. The world of Sterling Enterprises was a high-stakes chess game. Every day was filled with calculating executives, strategic alliances, and the constant pressure of the market. Her second-in-command, a sharp and ambitious man named David Chen, handled the day-to-day operations with ruthless efficiency, but the final decisions always fell to her. And then there was Julian Vance. Julian was a private equity magnate, a man as polished and cold as the chrome on his German sports car. He and her late husband had been associates, and since Richard's death, Julian had made it his personal mission to guide Isabella. He wanted to merge their empires, a move that would be celebrated on Wall Street. He saw her not as a woman to be loved, but as a company to be acquired. His advances were relentless, masked in concern, and veiled in compliments that always felt like assessments. He was everything she was running from. Her time with Liam and Lily was her escape. It was real. With them, she wasn't Isabella Sterling, the formidable Ice Queen of Tech, as one magazine had dubbed her. She was Izzy Clark, a freelance designer who laughed at Liam's bad jokes and was an expert on the anatomical inaccuracies of cartoon dinosaurs. The cracks in her carefully constructed alternate reality began to show one Thursday afternoon. Liam needed to pick up a specific part for a customer's car, and the only place that had it in stock was across town. He had an hour to kill before he had to pick up Lily, so he stopped at a convenience store for a bottle of water. While waiting in line, his eyes drifted to the magazine rack, and then he saw her. It wasn't Izzy. It was Isabella Sterling. Her face was on the cover of Forbes. The headline read, "The Silent Sterling, How Isabella Sterling Quietly Became the Most Powerful Woman in Tech." The photograph was stunning and severe. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon. She wore a dark, tailored power suit, and a necklace with a diamond the size of a robin's egg glittered at her throat. The friendly moss-green eyes he knew were there, but they were guarded, cool and appraising. It was the face of a commander, a queen on a corporate throne. The article mentioned her late husband, Richard Sterling, her multi-billion-dollar net worth, and her reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and intensely private. Liam felt the blood drain from his face. The bottle of water in his hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. He stared at the magazine, his mind struggling to connect the woman on the cover with the woman who had helped Lily bandage a scraped knee last weekend. Izzy Clark, the freelance graphic designer. It was all a lie. A cold, bitter feeling washed over him. He felt like a fool, a pawn in some bizarre game he couldn't comprehend. Why would a billionaire be hanging around a greasy garage, drinking burnt coffee in a diner, and pretending to be someone she wasn't? Was this some kind of charity case? Was he a social experiment? A story she would tell her rich friends about how she slummed it for a month? The cashier cleared his throat, snapping Liam out of his trance. "You gonna buy that?" Liam fumbled for his wallet, his hands shaking slightly. He bought the magazine. He had to be sure. He sat in his beat-up truck, the smell of old upholstery filling his nostrils, and read the article. Every word was a gut punch. Sterling Enterprises, the mansion on Lake Washington, the high-profile board members, the charity galas. It was a universe away from his life. His phone buzzed. A text from Izzy. "Hey, thinking of you. Hope the afternoon is going well." He stared at the message, the cheerful emoji, a mocking symbol of her deception. All the warmth he had felt, the tentative hope that had started to bloom in the barren soil of his grief, curdled into anger and humiliation. He didn't reply. Later that evening, after a silent dinner where Lily sensed his dark mood and retreated into her drawings, he called her. "Liam, hi." Her voice was bright, happy. It made his stomach twist. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat and cold. The change in his tone was immediate. "Liam, what's wrong? You sound upset." "I stopped for water today," he said, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. "And I saw a magazine. Forbes." Silence. On the other end of the line, in a room where a single painting was worth more than his entire apartment building, Isabella Sterling closed her eyes. The charade was over. "Liam, Is it you?" He cut her off, his voice dangerously quiet. "Isabella Sterling, is that you?" He could hear her take a shaky breath. Yes. The confirmation hit him harder than he expected. So what was all this? Why lie to me? Was this some kind of game? Were you bored? No, Liam, it wasn't like that at all. Please just let me explain." "Explain what?" He shot back, his hurt turning to rage. "Explain how you've been lying to me and my daughter for weeks. I have to go." "Liam, wait." He hung up. He tossed the phone onto the sofa and sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. The smiling, severe face from the magazine cover was burned into his mind. He had started to feel something for Izzy Clark. But Izzy Clark didn't exist. And he had no idea what to do with the truth about Isabella Sterling. The silence from Liam was a physical weight on Isabella. For 2 days, her calls went to voicemail, and her texts went unanswered. The vast, echoing quiet of her mansion felt more oppressive than ever. The lie she had told out of a desperate need for normalcy had backfired, destroying the one genuine connection she had found. She knew she couldn't fix this over the phone. On Saturday morning, she drove to his apartment complex. She didn't come in her chauffeur-driven sedan or a flashy sports car. She drove a simple, unassuming Audi, the most normal car she owned. She wore no makeup. Her hair was in a simple ponytail, and she was dressed in the same kind of jeans and sweater he was used to seeing her in. She was trying to be Izzy Clark, even though the illusion was shattered. She found him in the small shared yard behind the building, pushing a squeaking lily on an old swing set. When he saw her approaching, his posture stiffened. He stopped pushing the swing and said something quietly to Lily, who immediately ran over to Mrs. Gable's back porch. He faced Isabella, his arms crossed, his expression a mask of stone. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and tight. "I know," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But you wouldn't answer my calls. I had to explain." "There's nothing to explain. You're a billionaire, and I'm a mechanic. You lied to me. End of story." "No, that's not the end," she insisted, taking a step closer. He didn't back away. "Liam, please, look at me. When I met you, I was just lost. My husband, Richard, he was much older than me. Our life, our world was all about business. After he died, I was surrounded by people who wanted something from me. My money, my company, my influence. No one just saw me." She gestured vaguely at her simple clothes. "When my bike broke down, I was just having a terrible day, trying to feel something, anything, by riding that old thing he loved. And you helped me. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't want anything. You were just kind." Her green eyes were pleading, shimmering with unshed tears. "Being Izzy Clark wasn't about making a fool of you. It was about being able to breathe. It was a chance to be a person, not a headline. The moments with you and Lily, they have been the most real thing to happen to me in years. The lie was wrong, I know that. And I am so sorry. But the feelings behind it were real." Liam's stony expression began to crack. He could see the profound loneliness in her, the same emotion he wrestled with every night after Lily was asleep. He wanted to stay angry. It was easier, but looking at the woman before him, stripped of her corporate armor, he saw not the CEO from the magazine, but the vulnerable woman from that first rainy night. He started his voice, rough with emotion. "I felt like an idiot, like I was your pet project." "Never," she whispered. "You were my friend." The air between them was thick with unspoken feelings. The anger was fading, leaving behind a confusing mix of hurt and a powerful, undeniable connection. He was about to speak again when a sleek black Bentley purred to a stop on the street beside the apartment building. A chauffeur opened the rear door, and out stepped Julian Vance. He was the physical embodiment of wealth and power, dressed in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than Liam's truck, with perfectly coiffed hair and a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. He surveyed the drab apartment building with a look of faint disgust before his eyes landed on Isabella. "Isabella, darling," he said, his voice a smooth, condescending drawl. "I've been trying to reach you. David said you were unreachable. I see you've found a new hobby." His gaze flickered over to Liam, dismissing him in an instant as nothing more than part of the shabby scenery. Isabella's entire demeanor shifted. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by an icy composure. "Julian, what are you doing here? Your security detail mentioned you'd come to this charming neighborhood. I was concerned," he said, stepping onto the patchy grass. He deliberately placed himself between Isabella and Liam, a clear, territorial move. "We have the fundraiser gala tonight. You haven't forgotten, have you? I'm escorting you." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He then turned his attention fully to Liam, his eyes sweeping over Liam's worn jeans and faded t-shirt. "And you are?" he asked, his tone dripping with disdain. Before Liam could answer, Isabella stepped forward. "This is Liam Anderson. He's a friend." Julian's eyebrow arched. "A friend? How quaint." He offered a hand to Liam, his grip limp and brief. "Julian Vance." "A pleasure." It was clear it was anything but. He looked back at Isabella. "Darling, we should go. You need to get ready. We can't keep the governor waiting." The two worlds had collided. Right here on this sad patch of grass, Liam was face to face with Isabella's reality. The galas, the governors, the men like Julian Vance. He felt a chasm open up between them, a vast, unbridgeable gulf of class and wealth. All his insecurities came rushing to the surface. He wasn't just a mechanic, he was a nobody in her world. Isabella looked from Julian's smug face to Liam's conflicted one. She was trapped. "Julian, I'll meet you there," she said, her voice firm. "Nonsense! I'll wait," Julian insisted, leaning against his car as if claiming the entire street. She turned back to Liam, her eyes conveying a desperate apology. "Liam will finish this conversation later." He just gave a short, bitter nod. "Right. You should go. You don't want to keep the governor waiting." The sarcasm was not lost on her. With a final pained look, she walked toward the Bentley. As she got in, Julian shot one last look at Liam, a look of triumph and dismissal, the look a predator gives to something it has scared away from its prize. Liam watched the Bentley disappear down the street, a gleaming black symbol of a world he could never be a part of. The fragile truce he and Isabella had almost reached was shattered. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was defeated. The gala was a glittering affair, a suffocating kaleidoscope of champagne, fake smiles, and whispered power plays. Isabella moved through it like a ghost, her body present, but her mind miles away in a small apartment yard. Julian was insufferable, a possessive hand always on her arm, introducing her to people with the proprietary air of a man showing off a new acquisition. "That mechanic Liam," Julian said conversationally as they stood by the silent auction. "A bit of a rough character for you to befriend, isn't he?" "He's a good man, Julian," Isabella said through gritted teeth. "I'm sure he is," Julian said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "But people like that, they can be opportunistic. You have to be careful, Isabella. A woman in your position is a target." The hypocrisy was staggering, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. The entire night she deflected his advances and endured his condescension, her resolve hardening with every passing hour. She left early pleading a headache, leaving a fuming Julian behind. Meanwhile, Liam's sense of defeat festered. He felt naive and out of his depth. The image of Julian Vance and the Bentley was seared into his brain. That was her life. This the greasy garage, and the constant struggle was his. The two could never mix. He decided for his own sanity, and for Lily's sake, that he had to cut ties. It was better to have a clean break than to be a curious footnote in a billionaire's life. On Monday morning, his resolve was tested. A pristine, brand-new racing bicycle, the exact model Lily had been dreaming of, was delivered to his apartment. There was no note, but he knew exactly who it was from. It was a grand, sweeping gesture. It was a billionaire's gesture. And it felt like a slap in the face. It felt like charity. He spent an hour arguing with the delivery company before they finally agreed to take it back. His heart ached for the joy it would have brought Lily, but his pride, his sense of self, couldn't allow it. He couldn't be bought. His day went from bad to worse. Mr. Henderson called him into the office around noon. The older man looked uncomfortable, avoiding Liam's eyes. "Liam," he started shuffling papers on his desk. "We got a call this morning, from the Regional Safety Inspector's office." Liam frowned. "Everything's up to code. I checked the lifts last week." "I know. This was specific. A complaint was filed. About you." "About me?" "What complaint?" "Said you were doing off-the-books work on the side, using my bay and my tools without logging the hours. Said you were drinking on the job." Liam stared at his boss, stunned. "What, that's insane. Who would say that—" "It was anonymous, of course." Henderson sighed, finally meeting his gaze. "Look, son, I know it's garbage. You're the best mechanic I've ever had. But the inspector is coming tomorrow. They're talking about a full audit, pulling my license pending investigation. It's a mess. They're making it sound like I'm running a chop shop here." Liam's blood ran cold. He knew with a certainty that settled like a stone in his gut who was behind this. It wasn't about safety codes or off-the-books work. This was a message. This was Julian Vance. The slick, wealthy investor had seen him as a mild amusement, and now he was treating him like a bug to be squashed. He was going after his livelihood, the one thing that allowed him to provide for Lily. "He's trying to get me fired," Liam said, his voice barely a whisper. "What who is?" Henderson asked. Liam just shook his head. How could he possibly explain that he'd accidentally befriended a billionaire, and now her powerful suitor was trying to ruin his life? It sounded like a screenplay for a bad movie. "Liam," Henderson said, his voice heavy with regret. "The pressure they're putting on me. They mentioned my business loans, things they shouldn't know about. I can't lose this garage. It's all I have. I have to suspend you. Without pay. Pending the investigation. The words hit Liam like a physical blow. Suspended. Without pay. I understand, Liam said, his voice hollow. He didn't understand, not really, but he understood Henderson's position. He was a small business owner being squeezed by a force he couldn't see. Liam walked out of the office in a daze. He collected his personal toolbox, the tools his own father had passed down to him, and walked out of the garage for the last time. The place that had been his sanctuary, his source of stability, was now another casualty in a war he didn't even know he was fighting. He drove home, the weight of the world on his shoulders. How was he going to pay rent, buy groceries? What would he tell Lily? He felt a surge of helpless rage. Julian Vance, with a single phone call, had ripped the foundation out from under his life, all because he saw him as an inconvenience. That evening, a sleek envelope was delivered by a courier. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cardstock. It was an offer from a holding company, Vance Equity Partners, to buy Henderson's auto repair for a generous sum, with the clause that the property would be vacated and redeveloped. Attached was a note not on letterhead, but on a simple personal card. Some worlds are not meant to intersect. Stay in yours. There was no signature. It didn't need one. The next few days were a blur of despair for Liam. He tried to find other mechanic jobs, but the story of his suspension under a safety investigation had mysteriously spread. Doors that should have been open were politely but firmly closed. He was being blacklisted. He was burning through his meager savings at an alarming rate, the fear a constant metallic taste in his mouth. Isabella, meanwhile, was growing frantic. The bicycle had been returned. Liam was still not answering her calls. She felt him slipping away, and didn't know why. She was deep in preparation for the annual Sterling Tech Summit, her company's biggest event of the year, a gathering of the tech world's most powerful players. Julian Vance was a keynote speaker, a fact that made her stomach churn. Her assistant, a sharp young woman named Chloe, noticed her distraction. "Ms. Sterling, is everything all right?" "No," Isabella admitted. "I'm worried about a friend. I feel like something is terribly wrong." On a hunch, driven by the memory of Julian's threatening gaze, she asked Chloe to do something discreet. "Chloe, I want you to look into Vance Equity Partners, specifically any recent real estate inquiries they've made in the Fremont district, and see if there have been any anonymous complaints filed with the city's safety commission against small businesses in that area." What Chloe uncovered was worse than Isabella could have imagined. A holding company, a direct subsidiary of Vance Equity, had made an aggressive offer to buy a small garage, Henderson's Auto Repair. The same day, an anonymous, multi-pronged complaint had been filed against that very garage, specifically naming one employee, Liam Anderson. The complaint had been fast-tracked by a city official who sat on the board of one of Julian's charities. It was a clear, vicious, and undeniable pattern of corporate bullying. The rage that filled Isabella was cold and absolute. Julian hadn't just tried to intimidate Liam, he had tried to destroy him. He had used his immense power to crush an innocent man simply to clear a path to her. The night of the tech summit arrived. The main ballroom of the hotel was filled with industry titans, journalists, and investors. Isabella was slated to give the closing address. Julian Vance had given his speech an hour earlier, a slick presentation about disruptive synergy and aggressive growth, earning him a round of polite applause. He now sat at the head table looking smug. When Isabella took the stage, a hush fell over the room. She looked out at the sea of faces, her eyes scanning until they found Julian's. She set aside her prepared speech about the future of AI. "Good evening," she began, her voice calm but resonant with a dangerous power. Tonight we've talked about innovation progress and the future we are building. We talk about leveraging power to create change, but we rarely talk about the abuse of that power. A murmur went through the crowd. This was not on the program. Power isn't just about market caps and stock prices. She continued, her gaze locked on Julian. It's about integrity. It's about how we treat people, especially those with less power than ourselves. It has come to my attention that some individuals in our industry believe their influence gives them the right to ruin a man's life over a personal grudge. That they can use anonymous complaints and shell companies to get a man fired, to blacklist him, and to threaten his ability to feed his child simply because they see him as an obstacle. Julian's smile had vanished. His face was pale. People were starting to whisper, glancing between him and the stage. Sterling Enterprises was built on a foundation of innovation, yes, but also on respect, Isabella declared, her voice ringing with conviction. And I will not, now or ever, be in business with anyone who uses their power like a cudgel to bully and intimidate. The proposed merger, talks between Sterling Enterprises and Vance Equity, are as of this moment terminated. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. It was a public execution. She was severing a multi-billion-dollar deal in front of the entire industry. Furthermore, she added, her voice dropping to a steely quiet, any evidence of illegal market manipulation or coercion will be turned over to the proper authorities. We in this room have the power to build the future. We should endeavor to build one where character matters more than connections. She finished her speech with a simple "thank you" and walked off the stage, leaving a stunned and furiously buzzing room behind her. She ignored the reporters shouting questions and the frantic gestures from her own board members. She had only one destination. She found Liam at home, giving Lily a piggyback ride around their small living room, forcing a cheerfulness he clearly didn't feel. When he saw her at the open door, his charade dropped. He looked exhausted. "I saw you on the news," he said, quietly setting Lily down. "It was quite a speech. I found out what he did. Liam," she said, her voice thick with emotion as she stepped inside. "The garage, the complaints. I am so sorry. I brought this into your life." He just shook his head, a wry, tired smile on his face. "It's not your fault. It's his. But it doesn't change anything. My boss is being forced to sell. I'm still out of a job." "No, you're not," she said, stepping closer. She reached out and for the first time took his grease-stained hand in hers. His calluses were rough against her smooth skin. "My assistant just closed a deal an hour ago. We bought Henderson's Garage, a subsidiary of Sterling, a new one, focused on community investments. Mr. Henderson's loans are paid off, and he's staying on as a consultant. But the new company needs a new general manager. Someone who knows the place inside and out. Someone with integrity. Someone who's the best mechanic in Seattle." Liam stared at her, his mind struggling to process her words. You bought the garage." "I bought a garage," she corrected gently. "And I'm offering a job to the man I've been falling for. But I'm not offering it as a handout. I'm offering it as a partner. I need you to run it. I don't know the first thing about carburetors, but I know a lot about business. Together, we could make it something special." Tears welled in Liam's eyes. It wasn't about the money or the job. It was about her standing in his tiny apartment, fighting for him. She hadn't sent a lawyer or an assistant. She had come herself. She hadn't just saved him. She had seen him. "Izzy," he breathed, using the name that felt more real than any other. "It's Isabella," she whispered, a tear tracing a path down her own cheek. But my friends call me Izzy." He pulled her to him then, and in the middle of his humble living room, surrounded by the scent of crayon and cooked spaghetti, he kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of fairy tale rescue, but one of mutual survival, of two lonely, broken people finding their home in each other. The fallout from Isabella's public detonation at the tech summit was immediate and spectacular. News outlets dubbed it the Sterling Proclamation. Julian Vance's name became synonymous with corporate malfeasance, and within weeks, his empire built on a foundation of aggressive intimidation began to show deep, irreparable cracks as investors fled and boards ousted him. But Isabella barely registered his downfall. Her entire focus had narrowed to a small, grease-stained garage in Fremont, and the man who held its heart in his hands. Their first project together was the garage itself. One evening after closing, they stood in the center of the bay, the air thick with the familiar smell of oil and metal. Isabella held a set of architectural blueprints, while Liam held a stained coffee mug. "The consultants I hired suggest a complete gut renovation." Isabella began pointing to a rendering of a sterile, hypermodern facility that looked more like a tech startup than an auto shop. Glass walls, a customer-facing app for real-time updates, automated lifts. Liam took a slow sip of his coffee, studying the drawing. "It's beautiful, Izzy. It's also cold as a hospital. People don't bring their cars here because they want an app. They come here because they trust Mr. Henderson, and now they trust me. They know we won't sell them a radiator flush they don't need." He tapped a finger on the old, scarred wooden workbench against the wall. "This bench was my dad's. He gave it to Henderson when he retired. There's history here. Soul. We can't gut the soul." Isabella looked from the slick blueprint to the worn, dark wood of the bench, and she understood. She rolled up the plans. "Okay," she said, her voice decisive. "No consultants. You and me. You're the soul, I'll be the strategy. We'll make our own blueprint." And they did. The partnership that had begun in their personal lives now flourished professionally. Isabella's capital and business acumen brought in state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment that allowed Liam to work his magic with even greater precision. She redesigned the waiting room, not with cold chrome, but with comfortable armchairs, a bookshelf, free Wi-Fi, and a coffee machine that brewed genuinely good coffee. It became a neighborhood hub. Meanwhile, Liam's vision preserved the garage's core identity. He insisted on keeping the old workbench, sanding it down, and refinishing it himself. He instituted an apprenticeship program with a local vocational school, giving 2 young, eager mechanics the kind of mentorship he had received. The business, renamed Anderson and Sterling Automotive, didn't just survive. It thrived, built on a unique hybrid of old-school integrity and modern efficiency. Navigating their two worlds, however, remained a delicate dance. The first true test came a month later at a fundraiser for the Seattle Art Museum. Liam, feeling stiff and out of place in a rented tuxedo, stood beside Isabella, who looked ethereal in a deep emerald gown. He watched people greet her with a mixture of deference and familiarity, speaking a language of summering in the Hamptons and Aspen ski trips that was utterly foreign to him. An older woman with a severe haircut and a diamond necklace that could fund his garage for a year, a board member named Eleanor Whitcroft, pulled Isabella aside. Liam was just out of earshot, but he could read the woman's concerned expression and her quick, dismissive glance in his direction. "Isabella, darling, you look radiant," Eleanor said, her voice a low conspiratorial whisper. "But you must know people are talking. This mechanic. It's a lovely charitable impulse, I'm sure. But you have a position to maintain. Richard would have wanted you to be with someone of your own standing." Isabella's smile never wavered, but her eyes grew cool. "Eleanor, she said, her tone polite, but laced with steel. Richard would have wanted me to be happy. And as for standing, Liam Anderson has more integrity in his little finger than many of the men in this room have in their entire portfolios. His standing is with his daughter, his work, and his principles. And I find that far more valuable than a name on a yacht club roster. She gracefully excused herself and walked back to Liam, slipping her arm through his. "You okay?" she asked softly, sensing his discomfort. "Just trying to figure out if this tiny piece of fish is supposed to be the whole meal," he joked, though his eyes were serious. "I heard a bit of that. You don't have to defend me." "It wasn't a defense," she said, squeezing his arm. "It was a statement of fact. Let's get out of here. I'm craving a burger from the Greasy Spoon." As they left the glittering party behind, Liam knew that these moments would be part of their life. But he also knew that with her by his side, he wasn't an outsider crashing a party. He was simply with the woman he loved. The real integration happened not in her world or his, but in the one they built together in the small spaces of their lives. One Friday evening, Liam came home late from the garage, exhausted and smelling of transmission fluid. He pushed open the door to his apartment and stopped rooted to the spot. The air was filled with the warm, sweet scent of baking and the sound of Lily's unrestrained giggling. In his small kitchen covered in a dusting of flour from head to toe were Isabella and Lily. They were making cookies, and from the looks of it, more ingredients had ended up on them and the floor than in the mixing bowl. Isabella, the formidable CEO, who could silence a boardroom with a single glance, had a smudge of chocolate on her cheek and dough in her hair. She looked up at him, her face breaking into the most beautiful, unguarded smile he had ever seen. "We're making a mess," Lily squealed with delight. "A wonderful, perfect mess," Isabella agreed, her eyes meeting Liam's over Lily's head. In that moment, Liam saw it all. This was not a billionaire playing house. This was a woman who had been starved for warmth, for the simple, chaotic joy of family, finding it in his tiny kitchen. He felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. This was home. The home he thought had been extinguished forever when Sarah died was here again, brighter and different, but just as real. A few months later, on a crisp autumn Saturday, they were in the park. Lily was flying across the grass on a brand new bicycle. It wasn't a top-of-the-line racing model, but a sturdy bright blue bike with a basket on the front. Liam had bought it with the first bonus check from the now profitable garage. He remembered the look on Isabella's face when he'd shown it to her the night before, a look of such deep, understanding love. She knew what that purchase made with his own hard-earned money meant to him. It was a declaration of his own standing, his ability to be her partner, not her project. He sat on the bench, his arm around Isabella, watching his daughter ride. "You know," he said quietly, "that first day when you showed up at the garage after I saw you on that magazine, I felt so small, like our worlds could never ever fit together. I was the one who felt small," she confessed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I was living in a world built by my husband, playing a role I thought I was supposed to play. I had everything, and yet I had nothing at all. That day my bike broke down. I wasn't just stranded on the side of the road, Liam. I was stranded in my own life." He turned to look at her, at the woman who had publicly dismantled an empire for him, who had flour in her hair, in his kitchen, who was now watching his daughter with a maternal love that was fierce and true. "Look at us now," he whispered, a sense of wonder in his voice. Lily wobbled to a stop in front of them, her face flushed with happiness. "Izzy, Daddy, watch this. I can ride with no hands." They watched as she rode off again, her laughter echoing through the park. Isabella's eyes were shimmering. "I used to think assets were buildings and stock portfolios," she said softly. "But I was wrong. It's this. Watching her ride a bike, you bought her hearing that laugh. This is the real fortune." He tightened his arm around her, pulling her close. The blueprint they had drafted together wasn't for a garage or a business merger. It was for a family. A messy, unlikely, and beautiful family, built not on wealth or status, but on the simple, unshakable foundation of two lonely hearts, finding their way home, proving that the greatest structures are always built with love. In the end, this wasn't a story about a poor man being saved by a rich woman, or a woman finding a novelty in a simpler life. It was about two people who were both profoundly impoverished in the ways that truly matter. They were lonely. They were adrift. Through a chance encounter, they discovered that integrity is a currency more valuable than any stock, and that kindness is the one investment that always pays dividends. Liam didn't need Isabella's money, he needed her heart. And Isabella, who could have anything she wanted, discovered the only thing she truly needed was to be loved for who she was. Not what she owned. Their story reminds us that beneath the labels of our lives, mechanic CEO, rich poor, we are all just people searching for a place to feel at home. If their journey touched your heart, please take a moment to click the like button and share it with someone who might need a reminder of the power of kindness. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire and warm the soul. Thank you for listening.